Hey everybody, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and here on my YouTube channel, and this time out we're going to do another episode here. This should be episode 3 of our Universal Audio series, and this time we're going to look at the Pultec EQ. We're going to take a look at the EQP-1A Pultec and give you a little history lesson, as I always like to do with these plugins in the Universal Audio series, and we're going to listen to it on a couple of different sources. So before we get to that, if you like what you see in this video, hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. You already know that. Also, if this is your first time here, I want you to go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Links will be in the description box below. I want to give you a free $50 mixing course. It's my gift to you just for visiting homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I'm going to give you something else for free. So make sure you stick around. So here we are in Universal Audio's Luna recording system, their DAW, and here is the EQP-1A Pultec. Now, the reason for this series, and I will say that in the description box below, I have a playlist of all of the videos for this Universal Audio series, starting with episode 1, where we talk about the hardware and the whole ecosystem, and then systematically working through the plugins one at a time, and we'll eventually get to the point where I'm making some actual videos about the Luna recording system, their DAW. I have a lot of students that are starting to get interested in Universal Audio. I've done many videos in the past on some Universal Audio plugins and some of my mixing courses, and also here on YouTube. And just judging by some of the comments that I get, there's a lot of confusion around Universal Audio and how the whole ecosystem works and why it might benefit you, so on and so forth. And that's why I'm creating this Universal Audio series. So it's all in a playlist. It's in the description box below. Go check out all the videos if you want to learn more. Also, the links in the description box for everything Universal Audio out at Sweetwater.com. You can go check out all of the stuff that I talk about in these videos at Sweetwater.com. Their hardware, including their plugins, can all be purchased there if you'd like. Those are affiliate links, so when you purchase something with one of those links, you are helping me out here at Home Recording Made Easy, but you don't pay anything more for the product. So I want to tell you about that. And full disclosure, those are affiliate links, so you could go check that out in the description box below. So I've been a Universal Audio user all the way back in the early days of early 2000s, way back in the UAD1 days. I've been using Universal Audio forever. I love their stuff. I think they make some of the best plugins on the market. So let's talk a little bit about the Pultec here. So here is the Pultec on the screen here. Now, like with all these videos, I just don't want to have you listen to the plugin, which we're going to do, but I like to give you a little history lesson about the hardware so you know where the plugin kind of came from for people that are interested. So I have some notes here. I'm going to read you stuff right off the Vintage King website. And if you do some Googling about the history of the Pultec, there's a lot of interesting articles online, but I want to give you some of the highlights. So the Pultec all started in 1951 with the EQP-1, which was the first passive program equalizer on the market. This was a game changer in recording studios, as now you had the ability to manipulate sound farther than before, bring it closer to the front of the mix, and make it feel like you're in the room with the performer. Again, we're talking about 1951, so think about that, way back in the early 1950s. Now, for the entire duration of the Pultec, or Pulse Techniques, which is the name of the company that makes the Pultec, until the closing of their doors in the late 70s, there were only 2 employees, the founders Ollie Summerland and Gene Schenk. So when Pultec closed its doors in the 70s or the early 80s, there's only 2 people that actually worked there, the actual founding people. And between the 2 of them, they handled all the engineering, marketing, sales, and production responsibilities. In the early days, each Pultec piece was built by hand to order, and Ollie and Gene in their warehouse out in Teaneck, New Jersey. To this day, it would be hard to find a piece of gear that was built to the quality of the Pultec, which is why many of them are still in working condition. Many companies have tried to replicate the sound and build quality of the original Pultec design, and while some of them sound really good, there's nothing quite like the sound of a vintage EQP-1. So these things, if you think about it, back in the 50s, they were built by 2 people by hand to order, which is really unique, right? In today's times. Not like today where everything's built on an assembly line. These were truly hand-built, hand-wired pieces. If you know anything about analog recording studios, the Pultecs are very sought after. To find some in original condition can fetch thousands of dollars, upwards of $10,000. And as the article says, a lot of them are still in working condition with the original parts because they only use high-quality parts and they were built with the utmost craftsmanship for that time, which is really, really interesting. In regards to the EQP-1, the term magical seems to be appropriate. There's something about a Pultec that enhances anything you run through it, even if you don't apply any EQ. And I've been known to use this on things in a mix where a lot of engineers will put a Pultec, whether it's a plugin or the hardware, on their master bus and just run the mix through it. Don't even use the EQ knobs, just running the signal through the transformers and through the tubes. Add a little bit of weight and a little bit of thickness to a mix. It's something that people do all the time. There's a glow that happens within the tubes and the transformers that adds weight and low end and opens up the top end when you run signal through it. So that's some of the benefits of using a Pultec, not only the hardware, but also the plugin itself. So the design of a Pultec really is, it's a passive design with a tube makeup gain with a transformer. Okay, so this is a tube-based EQ. Some of the sound characteristics that I would use to kind of describe this plugin, and a lot of people would call it smooth, it's punchy, and it really sounds good on anything. And that's what I've just read to you, right? You can really run anything through it. It's hard to make a Pultec sound bad. It's really great on things like acoustic guitar or some things sometimes that sound maybe a little bit brittle on the top end. A Pultec will help smooth that out based on the tubes and the transformer circuitry. When you want to boost the top end and you need a lot of high end, but you don't want it to sound brittle, a Pultec is really, really good. It also has a very unique characteristic on the way the low end works. And I want to read to you a little bit about that as well. But first, before I read that to you, I want to make sure you understand the way the controls work here on a Pultec. So here is a version, and there's a couple of different versions of this inside of the Universal Audio plugin system here, and I'll talk to you about that in a second, but they're laid out exactly the same way. So as you can see, there's not a lot of controls here. Okay, you have on here on the left, a boost frequency and an attenuation for the low frequencies. The low frequencies are step 20, 30, 60, 100, okay? And you can boost and or attenuate, cut at the same time on these low frequencies. So these three knobs work together, these three controls: the low frequency, the boost, and the attenuate, okay? In the center, we have a bandwidth here, which really works with the high frequency. And next to that, we have a high frequency selector from 3K, 4K, 5, 8, 10, 12, 16, okay? And we have a boost. So the bandwidth, the boost, and the high frequency controls work together, okay? The attenuation or the cutting of the high frequencies, unlike the low frequencies, has nothing to do with this high frequency selector. It's with this high frequency, this selector here, 5, 10, and 20K. So you can, let's say, cut or attenuate 10K, while at the same time you could boost a little bit of 5K. Okay, that's how it works. So it's kind of limited in what you can do here, but that's kind of the magic of it. And then on this particular version of it, you also have an output knob here, again, plus or minus 12 dB to level match the plugin. So as you turn up frequencies, you can turn down and level match the before and the after. Now, one of the unique things about this EQ that you may have heard of is the fact that in the low frequencies, you can boost, let's say, for example, 60 Hertz, and at the same time you can cut. And you may say, well, how can you boost and cut the same frequency at the same time? Well, that's what I want to read to you about this. This is the magic, one of the magical features about the Pultec, which makes it unique from anything else that's on the market. So in the article, it says, in the documentation that was supplied with the hardware version of the EQP-1A, it is recommended that both boost and attenuation not be applied simultaneously to the low frequencies, because in theory, they would cancel each other out. In actual use, however, the boost control has a slightly higher gain than the attenuation has, and the frequencies they affect are slightly different. The EQ curve that results when boosted and attenuated simultaneously applied to the low shelf is difficult to describe, but very cool. Perhaps the sonic equivalent to a subtle low mid-range scoop, which can add clarity. Great trick for kick drums and bass instruments. Sound engineers long ago discovered that an interesting and useful equalization curves could be achieved by simultaneously boosting and cutting at the same time. As the boost and cut frequencies overlap, the trick has become known as the low-end trick. On a bass drum, for example, if 30 Hertz is simultaneously boosted and cut, the curve created gives a boost at 80 Hertz with a dip around 200 Hertz. A very pleasing curve on some bass drums. The sound can be sweetened further by using high frequency controls. Okay, so they said in the hardware, in the manual, don't boost and cut the low end at the same time, but engineers had found by doing that, the EQ curve works in a very interesting way, and the frequencies, the way they overlap, can achieve a very pleasing sound. That we're going to check that out. Okay, so that's something that no other EQ does, which is very cool. And they call it the low end trick. Okay, so that's the layout of a Pultec. Okay, now Universal Audio has a couple of versions of this. So the first version, way back in the early 2000s, they have the legacy version of the EQP-1A, much like the LA2A that we looked at last week, where the LA2A has a legacy version. Now the difference between the legacy version, now these were remodeled, if you will, I believe in 2012, 2013. Okay, the original came out in 2001. About 10 years later, they remodeled them, and they have the new version of it. The new version was a paid upgrade, and today, when you buy any Universal Audio hardware unit, whether it be an Apollo or a satellite system for the plugins, you will get the classic bundle, which includes the legacy version as part of that package, nothing to pay for, and then you can always upgrade to the newer modeled versions of them. And some people have asked, and I've done some research on really what's the difference between them. Well, the differences are this. First and foremost, on the legacy version, you don't have an output attenuator, meaning you just have an on and off switch here on the far right-hand side. So you can't level match the plugin before and after. So if let's say you're boosting a bunch of 60 hertz and maybe you're boosting a little bit of top end, the perceived volume is going to be louder, and you have no way to lower the output level. Where on the new versions, you do. You have a plus or minus 12 dB here, not just an on and off, which is great for when you want to level match the plugin. The other things that I read out on the internet, UA site, and some other forums, is that the difference also is in the technology and the way that they were able to model these old pieces of analog gear. Back in 2001 or 2000, when the legacy was developed, they say they did not do the transformer circuitry, the input transformer circuitry back then. They just did the EQ section, whereas on the new versions, not only is the transformer circuit and the tube circuit also included, but there's some non-linearities and some harmonic distortion and some saturation stuff that happens with the hardware that was better captured in the newer versions. What does that all mean in layman's terms? It means that they did a better and more accurate job modeling these plugins 10 years after the originals, because the technology was better. The way they model this stuff has gotten better, and therefore it sounds more authentic to the hardware. Okay, that's really the difference. Whether you need to really upgrade or not really depends. You can always demo any of the Universal Audio plugins, and you can demo them for yourself, so you can decide whether one sounds better enough, more pleasing to your ear, where you'd want to pay the money to upgrade. Now, when you do upgrade to the Pultec collection, you not only get the EQP-1A, but you also get along with it, which I'm not going to really listen to, I'll just kind of show you today. You also get the MEQ5, which is the mid-range EQ, okay? And we can take a walk through this in a minute. And you also get the high and low pass filters, the HLF3C, I think this is called. It's hard to see the little writing here. So you get these three when you buy the collection today. You get these three plugins. So you get the famous EQP-1A, and you also get the mid-range, and you also get the high and low cut filters. Okay, where on the legacy, you just get the EQP-1A. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Okay, so now enough jibber jabber. Now that we know a little bit about the Pultec, let's listen to it. I ran a bunch of unprocessed, unmixed drum tracks, kick, snare, overhead toms, and some percussion to a drum bus. Let's listen to this on a drum bus, and we can listen to what the low end does, and we'll do that. So if I were to solo this up. Okay, that's completely unprocessed. So we're going to turn it on now. We're going to do a little bit of that 60 hertz bump, maybe to get a little low end on that kick drum. And I'm going to do a little bit of boosting and a little bit of cutting so we could hear what that does. If I turn it off, that's before. I want to make sure we don't have the mid-range EQs on. Do we have these on? No, we don't. Okay, let me just make sure those are not turned on so we can Right, these are up, this one is. Let's make sure this one's turned off, right? Okay, so I boost a little 60. So you boost in a little bit, you know. Now this also isn't 1 dB, 2 dB, 3 dB, 4 dB. I'm not sure what the decibel increments are as you turn this up. I know a lot of people will refer that if you put it at 5, it's 5 dB. It's not 5 dB exactly. What it is exactly, who cares? We use our ears. But anyway, let's turn this up a bit and now listen to the bottom end of this drum kit. Now we can use some of the attenuator. So it takes a little bit more of some of the flubbiness out of it, and that's some of that low-end trick where you have these overlapping frequencies that as you boost, it gets a little muddy, a little bit more loose and flabby, and by using that attenuation and cutting at the same frequency, in this case 60 hertz, it tends to focus and tighten up the low end of the kick drum a little bit more. Right? Before. Interesting, right? Maybe that's a little much. Now I'll say maybe we want a little top end, maybe around a little 10, 12K. And our bandwidth here is our kind of our cue for the high frequencies. Okay. That's before. And if it gets a little louder, again, on this newer version of it, you can turn down the output a little bit to kind of level match the plugin because we're boosting quite a bit here. So we want to maybe level match it. Before, after. Maybe on the low end, let's try 30 hertz. Let's see what happens there. Okay, so 30 hertz, get a little bit more subsonic, a little more thuddiness of the kick drum, and by using that attenuation at the same time, again, it focuses and it tightens it up a little. Again, remember, this is on a drum bus where the kick, snare, overheads, toms, and percussion have not been processed at all. I'm doing this on completely raw tracks so you can hear the effect of what this does. Before, after. So that's, again, it's very musical and it sounds really great. Pultec, again, you can run anything through it and it sounds good. Now that's the original, that's the newer version. You know, now again, like I said, you also have the legacy version, which has the same set of controls, but the difference is you don't have a way to level match and turn it down. It's either on or off. So if we try kind of the same kind of settings here, let's see what we got here. Okay, so it's considerably louder because we don't have a way to turn it down. So you'd have to put some kind of a gain plugin or something after it if you want to really level match it. But now what if we were to just compare the two just for the sake of doing it? So the one on the top here is the remodel, the newer version of it. The bottom one here is the legacy version. And if we put the settings around the same, it's going to sound very similar. As a matter of fact, I do have it pretty much around the same. Do I not? I have the high end a little bit higher here. And again, one's going to be louder than the other because we don't have the ability to level match the other one. But let's just see, is there any real difference other than that? We'll start with the newest one, the remodeled one, okay? The better, I use that term loosely, of the two. Again, where they say that they've actually modeled the transformers as well, which they didn't do in the legacy version. At least that's the information I found online. How accurate that information is, I'm not 100% certain. That's just some of the stuff that I've read. That's the legacy. So maybe the modeled one, the newer one, maybe has a little more focus on the bottom end, just a tiny bit. It is very subtle. Again, I don't know. That could just be because they modeled two different versions of the Pultec, two different physical units. That could have something to do with this whole transformer thing. What's going on with Luna here? Hopefully we don't crash. That would be a shame. But you can hear that the differences are pretty subtle. Let's see here if we happen to crash, I'll reboot. No, there we go. Okay, so that's on drums, on a drum bus. Okay. So now let's listen to let's listen to the Pultec now on maybe an acoustic guitar, a raw acoustic guitar track, which is something else I use a Pultec a lot on. So maybe something here, maybe at 100 Hertz, we want to kind of attenuate here. Again, this is the newer one. So a little bit of 12K. That's before. After. $16K. Nice way to add a little bit of air around this thing without it getting brittle or harsh. Okay, now the other thing you can do, which we didn't talk about here on the last one here, is we could use also too. Let me just can I drag this over? Let me move over the high cuts and low cuts just to show this to you. So I believe in Luna, if I take this and I put this here, will that do that? I believe so. And if I take this and put this here, nope, that didn't do it. Let's get rid of this. Nope. Still learning. Disable, enable, remove. Okay. So here is, now we want to take, that's the high. We want to take, oh yeah, that's what I wanted. Okay. So here we go. So here's the high cut and low cut. This is the HLF, right? So if I turn this on and maybe put this before the EQP1, right? So we'll open up this and then open up this. We could do some low cuts here, maybe not have to do it here on the EQP1. Can you really hear it there? Okay, so you can even use the high pass and low pass, high cuts, low cut filters if you wanted to as well. And again, once again, they also have Again, I know this is not really part of this video here. If I put the, let's see, the mid-range one here in Luna, if I put the mid-range EQ, let me just do this. We can, the Pultec MEQ5, here is the mid-range EQ. So where, let me show you the layout here. So you have a peaking, a boosting, 2, 3, 5, 7, 1K here with this knob. We have a cutting in the middle here, mid-range cuts here in the middle with this knob, and then we have a peak here as well for the boosting the high end. So I want to take out some of that 500 hertz maybe. So you go from that to that. And if you add that with the EQP-1, right? Okay, so again, there's a lot of possibilities here, but the takeaway with the Pultec is that it's extremely unique. It's extremely unique sounding. Again, you could put it on anything and it sounds good. And Universal Audio has done a great job modeling these. And I like the fact that you do with the new Pultec collection. Not only do you get the EQP-1A, which again is the one that most people gravitate to. It's the one that you see mostly on YouTube. It's the one that most people use. But the fact that you also get the mid MEQ5 as well as the high cut and low cut, it's a nice little collection to have. And again, it's, you know, it's all been remodeled from the legacy versions and they're much more accurate. And again, you could run anything through them and they sound good. Now, if you're not a Universal Audio user, there are many companies that make emulations of a Pultec. And I've done a whole live stream video on that. Again, you can check the link in the description box below where we shot out this against a bunch of Waves and a bunch of other ones, Apogee and a whole bunch of other ones. They all sound good. They're all going to sound a little different because they were all they're all modeling different physical Pultec EQs, and each piece of hardware is going to sound a little different. And every company that doesn't, their modeling technology might be slightly different in the way they develop the algorithms, but they all sound pretty good. But what I found with the Universal Audio ones, and what I said even in that live stream, is that it seems to me that the Universal Audio emulation of this particular plugin has a little bit more of a 3D depth to it, in my opinion. It sounds a little bit more rich sounding than maybe the Waves one or the one by Apogee or by some of the other ones, even the one by Studio One called the Passive EQ. I tend to gravitate more towards the Universal Audio version and always have. But the moral of the story is, even if you don't have a Universal Audio rig, which is what these videos are kind of about, Universal Audio products, but you should have a Pultec in your plug-in collection. It's not something that any old EQ does. It sounds way different than just a regular stock EQ. And again, it has its place and can be used on a variety of different things. So I hope you enjoyed this little look and history lesson about the Pultec EQ. I really like it. I invite you to go check it out. You can check the links in the description box below to go out to Sweetwater if you want to check out this or more Universal Audio hardware and or plugins. And like I said, check the playlist because I'm going to be adding more of these Universal Audio series of videos to that playlist. And we're going to go through all the plugins that I own at one point. And we're going to dive a little deeper into the new Luna recording system, which I really enjoy as well. Now, I want to thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. And as I said at the beginning, I want you to go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and get your free mixing course worth about $50. It's my gift to you. Check it out. Check out that course. If you like that course and you dig my style of teaching and you want to learn more about mixing, mastering, recording, EQ, compression, blah, 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 then check out some of the other courses I have on the training course page on my website. And if you want to check out one of my paid training courses, I want to give you a 25% discount. I want you to use the coupon code YouTube25. YouTube25 will take 25% off any one of my training courses on my website. Again, I want to invite you and I thank you so much for checking them out. And until the next video, I've been Dave. with homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Oh, and by the way, leave comments below. What do you think about the Pultec EQ? Do you have universal audio? Do you use another company's Pultec? What do you think of it? What instrumentation do you use it on? What do you like most about the Pultec? Let me know in the comments below. And until the next video, again, I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.